Deep beneath the Earth's surface, where shadows cling to the rocks like old warnings, there are crystals that glow with an unnatural light, crystals no miner dares to touch. Ancient myths whisper of men who ignored these warnings, who swung their pickaxes into veins of shimmering stone, only to vanish without a trace. Some say their souls were trapped inside the very gems they sought, forever cursed to guard the treasures that doomed them. These aren't just stories, they're echoes of a fear that spans continents and cultures, a universal taboo carved into the bedrock of human history. Why do so many legends, from the misty forests of Europe to the sun-baked deserts of Africa, agree on one thing? Some crystals were never meant to be mined. Think of the emerald mines of South America, where Inca priests spoke of stones that sang with the voices of angry gods. Or the sapphire caves of Sri Lanka, where guardians warned that certain gems carried the weight of ancient oaths. Break them, and the earth itself would revolt. These tales aren't just folklore, they're survival lessons wrapped in mystery. For thousands of years, humanity has passed down one chilling message: disturb the wrong crystal, and you awaken something far older than greed. But what if these myths were more than just superstition? What if they were rooted in something real, something our ancestors understood but we've forgotten? That's the journey we're starting today. Together, we'll unravel the secrets of these forbidden stones, tracing their echoes through shattered empires and whispered legends. You'll discover why a single crystal could doom an entire kingdom, how a gemstone's curse might actually be a twisted kind of protection, and most haunting of all, why so many cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, told the same stories. This isn't just about rocks, it's about the invisible lines our ancestors drew between the sacred and the deadly. So stay close and watch your step. Because some treasures glitter for a reason, and not all of them want to be found. Cursed crystals aren't just rare stones, they're prisons for something far darker. Across cultures, these gems are described as vessels, holding everything from trapped souls to the wrath of forgotten deities. Take the blood-red zircons of Cambodia, said to pulse like a heartbeat when held too long. Or the obsidian mirrors of the Aztecs, which weren't just reflective, they were doorways, and staring into them risked letting something stare back. These stones share a pattern. They don't just exist passively in the earth. They wait. What makes a crystal cursed? The myths point to two forces at work. First, there's the physical anomaly: unnatural colors, eerie luminescence, or shapes that defy nature. The Maori spoke of Paunamu jade that grew hotter the deeper it was carried into caves, as if resisting being taken. Then there's the metaphysical stain, the belief that violence, betrayal, or sacrilege leaves a mark on stone. In Tibet, certain turquoise is avoided not because of its color, but because it's said to form where monks were buried alive, their final prayers crystallizing into something unspeakable. But here's the chilling truth our ancestors understood: cursed crystals aren't accidents, they're warnings. The Greek historian Pausanias wrote of emeralds near Delphi that drove miners mad with visions until priests revealed the gems were offerings to the underworld gods, never meant for mortal hands. Similarly, the Navajo still avoid uranium deposits, calling them yellow dirt that steals souls, long before science explained radiation sickness. Coincidence? Or proof that these stories were more than metaphor? Perhaps the most unsettling property of these stones is their persistence. Unlike wood or bone, crystals don't decay. A cursed diamond doesn't forgive, a malicious opal doesn't forget. That's why so many legends end the same way: the gem always returns, the Hope Diamond's trail of suicides. The Black Prince's ruby, bleeding before battles. These stones outlive their thieves, carrying curses across centuries like patient hunters. And that raises a question we'll explore next: what happens when humanity ignores the warnings? Because the myths agree on one thing: cursed crystals always collect their debt. The fear of cursed crystals isn't confined to one civilization or continent. It's a thread woven through the tapestry of human history, appearing in cultures separated by oceans and millennia. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs believed emeralds were the shattered bones of gods, and mining them risked unleashing celestial fury. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Celtic druids warned that certain moonlit quartz held the trapped breath of the earth itself, and disturbing them would bring droughts or plague. These stories aren't just coincidental, they're echoes of the same primal understanding that some stones are more than minerals, they're covenants. What's striking isn't just the universality of these taboos, but the eerie consistency in their reasoning. In West Africa, the Dogon people revered certain meteorite crystals as fragments of the creation star, far too sacred to extract. In Japan, Shinto priests taught that amethysts from sacred mountains housed kami spirits, and removing them would unravel the land's harmony. Whether framed as divine punishment, ecological revenge, or spiritual consequence, the message is identical. Violate these boundaries and the consequences will be catastrophic. But why would cultures with no contact share such specific fears? One answer lies in the crystals themselves. Many forbidden stones share uncanny physical traits, unnatural brilliance, strange resonance, or even radioactivity. The Maori's glowing paunamu, the Incas' singing emeralds, the Tibetan turquoise that forms near-human remains, these aren't just poetic metaphors, they're observations. Ancient peoples may not have understood radiation or infrasound, but they recognized patterns. Miners collapsing near certain veins, villagers falling ill after disturbing sacred deposits. The myths became a way to encode survival, yet there's a deeper layer. These taboos often emerge in regions where mining could destabilize fragile ecosystems or provoke territorial conflict. The Lakota's prohibition against taking quartz from bare butt, for example, preserved a sacred watershed. The Celtic bans on harvesting certain stones may have prevented overmining in a land where topsoil was thin and life depended on balance. In this light, the curses weren't just supernatural, they were societal safeguards, wrapped in the only language that could enforce them: terror. Perhaps most haunting is how these stories converge on one truth, that greed has a cost. The Greek legend of King Midas is echoed in the Zuni tale of a man who stole turquoise from the ant people and starved as his crops withered. The Hopi speak of a blue quartz that, if mined, would make the sky angry, mirroring the Norse warning that digging too deep could wake the giants. These aren't just morality tales, they're the collected wisdom of civilizations that understood something we've often forgotten: that the earth doesn't give endlessly. It negotiates, and that negotiation is written in crystal. The next time you hold a gemstone, ask not just where it came from, but what was sacrificed to bring it to light. Because the oldest curses aren't about magic, they're about memory. And memory, like a diamond, is forever. In the sun-scorched hills of ancient Greece, miners whispered of a stone so powerful it could bend light itself, the heliotrope. Its surface, dotted with crimson specks like dried blood, was said to shift color under the sun, granting its bearer the gift of invisibility. But this wasn't just a treasure, it was a trap. According to legend, the god Helios, enraged that mortals might steal his power of concealment, cursed the stone so that any who mined it would inherit not its magic but its madness. The stories are chillingly specific. A shepherd in Thessaly, lured by rumors of wealth, chiseled a heliotrope from a cliff face, only to wake the next day blind, his eyes scorched as if he'd stared directly into the sun. A merchant in Corinth smuggled a pouch of the stones aboard his ship, only for the crew to vanish one by one, their voices still echoing on the wind as if they'd become invisible to the world but not to fate. Even the great physician Galen wrote of a patient who wore a heliotrope amulet, convinced it made him unseen, until he walked off a cliff, his last words insisting the ground wasn't there. What makes the heliotrope's curse so haunting is its duality. Unlike other cursed gems which harm indiscriminately, this one twisted desire into delusion. Those who sought invisibility didn't just die, they became ghosts in their own minds, trapped between seen and unseen. The playwright Aeschylus hinted at this in A Lost Tragedy, where a king who mined the stone began seeing enemies in every shadow, only to realize too late the enemy was his own reflection. But the deepest horror lies in the heliotrope's origins. Greek texts claim these stones formed where the blood of titans fell during their war with the gods' crystallized defiance against divine order. To mine them wasn't just theft, it was rebellion, and the gods, as always, collected their debts. Modern geologists note that some heliotropes contain trace metals like cinnabar, which can cause mercury poisoning when handled. Coincidence or proof that the ancients once again wrapped truth in myth? This stone's legacy endures in an unexpected place, the word heliotrope itself. Today, it names a flower that turns toward the sun, an echo of the gem's cursed dance with light. A reminder that some gifts aren't meant to be taken, because invisibility, like all power, has a price. And the heliotrope's price was always the mind. In the frostbitten halls of Norse mythology, where dwarves toiled in fire-lit forges beneath the mountains, there was one treasure so feared even gods hesitated to claim it: the Anvaranot, a golden ring cursed by the very hands that shaped it. Crafted by the dwarf Andvari, this wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a vortex of greed pulling all who possessed it toward ruin. The ring's story begins with betrayal, a god's demand, a dwarf's reluctant surrender, and a whispered curse that would echo through sagas for centuries. "Let this gold destroy all who covet it," Andvari vowed, sealing the fate of kings, heroes, and even the mighty Odin's son. What makes the Anvaranot so chilling isn't just its power, but how it exposes the fragile line between ambition and obsession. When the trickster Loki stole it to pay a blood debt, he set off a chain reaction of disasters. The ring passed to a dragon-hoarding king, then a hero who won it by slaughter, each owner believing they could outsmart the curse. They were wrong. The Volsunga saga describes how the ring slithered through generations like a venomous serpent, twisting love into vengeance, honor into paranoia. Even Sigurd, the greatest dragon slayer of Norse legend, fell to its influence. His marriage crumbling, his allies turning to enemies, all because of a single golden loop. But the deeper lesson lies in who crafted it. Dwarves in Norse myths weren't just miners, they were the earth's protectors, its furious scribes. Every gem they cut, every sword they forged carried the weight of cosmic balance. The Anvaranot's curse wasn't random malice, it was a reckoning. By cursing the ring, Andvari wasn't just punishing thieves, he was revealing a truth the Norse held sacred: the earth's treasures aren't passive loot. Their tests, this idea reverberates beyond the sagas. The dwarves' workshops were often described as labyrinths, their entrances guarded by runes warning mortals away. Some caves echoed with screams if trespassers approached, a phenomenon modern scholars link to wind tunnels or toxic gases. But to the Norse, these weren't natural hazards, they were the dwarves' voices hissing through stone. Even the placement of these forges mattered. Many myths situate them near volcanic vents or glacial fissures, places where the earth visibly bled or groaned. The message was clear: dig too greedily here and the land itself would fight back. Perhaps the most haunting parallel lies in the Norse apocalypse, Ragnarök. When the world ends, it's not just armies that clash, the earth revolts. Mountains crumble, seas boil, and caverns spew forth horrors. In this light, the Anvaranot's curse feels like a microcosm of the dwarves' warning: exploit the earth without reverence and the debt will come due catastrophically. It's no accident that the ring's final owner, Brynhild, throws herself onto a funeral pyre with it, a literal cleansing by fire. The curse could only end when the gold returned to the elements, ashes to ashes, or to earth. Today, we still whisper versions of this story. The resource curse plaguing nations rich in oil or diamonds mirrors the Anvaranot's legacy, wealth that breeds violence instead of peace. The environmental devastation of strip mines recalls those dwarven labyrinths collapsing on greedy intruders. The Norse didn't just spin tales, they encoded a blistering critique of exploitation into their mythology. So the next time you hear a modern parable about fracking causing earthquakes or blood diamonds funding wars, remember, the dwarves warned us first: some treasures don't enrich. They echo. In the golden sands of Egypt, where the Nile's whispers mingle with the winds of the afterlife, lapis lazuli wasn't just a stone, it was a fragment of the gods. Deep blue as the night sky, speckled with golden pyrite-like stars, this gem adorned the burial masks of pharaohs, inlaid into the eyes of Tutankhamun himself. But the ancients didn't just value lapis for its beauty. They believed it pulsed with divine energy, a conduit between the living and the dead. And to steal it from a tomb wasn't theft, it was sacrilege, a violation so grave it carried a curse woven into the very hymns of the underworld. The evidence of this terror lingers in the archives of archaeology. In 1922, when Howard Carter first breached Tutankhamun's tomb, the world marveled at the lapis-laden treasures within. But whispers followed of the team's misfortunes: financier Lord Carnarvon dead from an infected mosquito bite, others stricken with unexplained fevers, equipment failing mysteriously. Newspapers called it the curse of the pharaohs, but Egyptian priests would have recognized it as Maat, the cosmic balance exacting its price. The lapis lazuli sarcophagus inlays, meant to guide the pharaoh's soul through the Duat, had been disturbed. And the gods, it seemed, noticed, yet the most chilling accounts come from lesser-known tombs. In 1936, a French archaeologist removed a lapis scarab from a priest's burial chamber in Saqqara. Within weeks, his notes describe waking to find the gem on his pillow, though he'd locked it in a case. Workers refused to touch it, muttering about the stone that watches. Modern skeptics might dismiss this as guilt or suggestion until you learn that lapis from that region often contains trace amounts of uranium, emitting low-level radiation. Coincidence, or had the ancients marked their sacred stones with something far more lethal than superstition? The Egyptians didn't fear death, they feared imbalance. Lapis lazuli, mined from the mountains of Afghanistan and traded across empires, was more than a commodity. It was a covenant. The Book of the Dead spells it out. Certain gems were anchors for the soul, and removing them risked unleashing the chaos serpent Apep. Even the process of mining lapis was ritualized, with chants to appease the earth for its sacrifice. No wonder the curses etched into tomb walls often targeted not just thieves but their bloodlines. The message was clear: some debts span generations. Perhaps the most haunting proof lies in what wasn't stolen. In the tomb of Queen Amenhotep, excavators found a lapis necklace placed deliberately atop a heap of gold, as if daring someone to take it. None did. The local workmen, even in poverty, refused, because in Egypt curses weren't just threats, they were laws written in the language of the divine. And lapis lazuli, with its celestial hue, was the ink. Today, museums display these stones behind glass, labels noting their cultural significance. But stand close to Tutankhamun's lapis pectoral in Cairo, and you'll see visitors hesitating before photographs, as if fearing the flash might wake something. Because deep down, we still feel it, the weight of those ancient warnings. The stones might be silent now, but their curses, those like the desert sands, never truly settle. In the misty groves of ancient Britain, where oak trees whispered secrets to the wind, the Druids guarded knowledge far older than written word, knowledge carved into the very stones beneath their feet. Among their most sacred teachings was a warning: some crystals were not treasures to be taken, but living vessels of the land itself, the milky quartz veins snaking through Welsh mountains. Druids called them the bones of the earth, and to chip them away was to risk the land growing sick. The glittering amethyst deposits in Scottish streams. Not gems, but frozen tears of the Cailleach, the winter goddess who shaped the hills. These weren't mere superstitions, they were ecological wisdom wrapped in myth. Take the legend of the Preseli bluestones, the massive dolerite monoliths later dragged to Stonehenge. Oral traditions claim druids would only move them after weeks of singing to the stones, convincing them to walk for a greater purpose. Those who tried to quarry them without ritual, they spoke of tools shattering, of sudden storms that felt like the sky itself objecting. Modern geologists note these stones have unusual acoustic properties, strike them just right, and they ring like bells across valleys. The Druids may have known what science now confirms. These stones sang when the earth shifted, acting as natural seismic alarms. Disturb them and you silenced the land's voice. But the most chilling taboos surrounded the so-called spirit stones, crystals with odd inclusions that Druids believed housed ancestral watchers. A cairngorm with a smoky phantom inside wasn't just a flawed gem, it was a soul mid-journey trapped between worlds. The Irish tale of the weeping agate tells of a warrior who pried one from a burial mound, only for the stone to drip salt water in his palm until his entire clan drowned in a freak tide. Similar stories echo in Brittany, where fishermen still avoid beaches with certain pink granites, saying the stones murmur with the voices of those lost at sea. What makes the Druidic warnings unique is their focus on balance. Unlike curses that targeted individuals, these taboos spoke of collective consequences: failed harvests, dried-up springs, stillborn livestock. The Carmarthenshire singing cave was said to house a crystal-lined chamber where notes from the underworld echoed. Miners who stole its calcite formations allegedly triggered landslides that buried nearby villages. Coincidence, perhaps, but the Druids understood something we often forget. Ecosystems are symphonies, not collections of soloists. Remove one crystalline note, and the entire melody collapses. This reverence survives today in subtle ways. In Cornwall, some hedgerows still twist around outcrops of tourmaline, left untouched by generations of farmers. Irish builders sometimes appease quartz veins by placing offerings of milk in foundation trenches. These quiet acts carry the echo of an ancient truth that some stones were never meant to be owned. They were and remain the land's living memory. To take them isn't theft, it's amnesia. In the sun-baked canyons of the American Southwest, where red rock walls rise like ancient sentinels, the Navajo speak of turquoise not as a gem, but as the hardened sky fallen to earth, a sacred covenant between land and people. But this gift came with guardians. Stories tell of miners who ventured too greedily into certain veins, only to find not blue stone but yellow eyes staring back from the darkness. These were the mines guarded by skinwalkers, shapeshifters who wore human faces by day and prowled as wolves or owls by night. Their presence wasn't random, it was a warning etched into the very color of the stone. Turquoise in Navajo cosmology isn't just decorative, it's alive. The Dene creation stories describe how first women strung turquoise beads to create the constellations, weaving the night sky with fragments of the Earth's soul. To mine it carelessly wasn't just theft, it was unraveling the fabric of the world. That's why certain deposits, like those near Cerrillos or the Sleeping Beauty mine, were whispered to be protected by Ye Noldlushii skinwalkers who'd twist a thief's mind as easily as their own bodies. Pueblo legends mirror this dread, describing blue-hungry ghosts that clung to stolen turquoise, draining the life from anyone who wore it without purification rites. One recurring tale tells of a trader in the 1800s who bribed his way into a forbidden Navajo turquoise pit. He emerged with his pockets full, bragging the spirits were just superstition, until his caravan found him days later, nails torn off from clawing at his own skin, his last words insisting the stones were burrowing into his bones. Modern geologists note that some southwestern turquoise forms near arsenic-rich copper deposits, which can leach into groundwater. Coincidence, or did the skinwalkers choose their territories wisely? The horror in these stories isn't just supernatural, it's legal. Many guarded turquoise veins bordered sacred sites or vital water sources. The Pueblo's Zuni Mountains, for instance, hold turquoise seams that snake beneath springs, feeding entire communities. Disturb the stone and the water might vanish. The skinwalker myth served as a brutal enforcement mechanism, ensuring mines were only worked communally, with offerings made to balance the earth's loss. Even today, some Dene jewelers refuse to sell certain night-mined turquoise, believing stones taken without dawn prayers carry a restless energy. Perhaps the most haunting proof lies in what wasn't documented. Early anthropologists noted that Navajo maps marked certain turquoise deposits with symbols meaning walking poison, not because the stone was toxic, but because taking it set consequences in motion. Like the Greek Furies or the Norse Norns, skinwalkers weren't arbitrary punishers. They were the embodiment of cause and effect. Steal the sky's flesh, and the sky would take something in return. This wisdom echoes in an unexpected place: modern mining lawsuits. When corporations tried to extract uranium near sacred turquoise deposits in the 1970s, Navajo elders didn't just cite environmental concerns, they spoke of waking things better left sleeping. The mines flooded, equipment failed. Some workers claimed to hear growls in tunnels where no animals could reach. The projects were abandoned not by courts but by terrified crews. Rationalists call it bad luck. The Dene would say the guardians are still there, still watching, still hungry. So the next time you admire a southwest turquoise necklace, look closely. Those black spiderweb veins in the stone, the Navajo say they're not flaws, they're fences. High in the volcanic peaks of Japan, where mist curls like the breath of sleeping giants, the tengu keep watch over the mountain's crystalline veins. These legendary bird-like spirits, with their crimson faces and mastery of mystical arts, were said to brandish swords forged from sacred ore, and woe to any mortal who dared steal what the mountains hadn't willingly given. Among their most fiercely guarded treasures were the yos, ishi, spirit stones crystals that pulsed with the same energy that made the tengu's feathers rustle without wind. One chilling account from the Edo period tells of a merchant who bribed villagers to lead him to a hidden amethyst deposit on Mount Kurama. As his workers chipped away at the violet crystals, they swore the stones whimpered like wounded animals. The merchant ignored them until the mountain answered. That night, a storm unlike any recorded tore through the valley, sending boulders crashing onto the mining camp. Survivors claim to see winged figures perched in the lightning-lit cedars, their laughter sharper than the wind. When rescuers reached the merchant, they found him alive but changed, his fingers twisted into claw-like shapes, his speech reduced to guttural shrieks. Local priests declared him tengu possessed, his body hijacked as a vessel for the spirit's wrath. What makes these tales so unsettling is their specificity. Unlike European curses that often strike blindly, tengu vengeance follows precise rules. In the Yamabushi monk's scrolls, it's written that certain crystals act as aki no tomashibai, lanterns for evil spirits. Disturb them, and you don't just anger the tengu, you invite malevolent forces into the human world. The Nihon Ryoiki, an 8th century collection of Buddhist tales, describes a noblewoman who wore a quartz pendant taken from a tengu shrine. Within months, her household was plagued by poltergeist activity, sake cups floating, kimonos slashed by invisible blades, until a priest traced the disturbance to the stone. When returned to the mountains, the quartz allegedly sprouted feather-like filaments, proof it had been a tengu's third eye all along. Modern geologists note an eerie pattern. Many tengu-protected deposits lie near fault lines or volcanic vents. The infamous Crow's Tear obsidian of Mount Hoki, for example, forms in gas-rich lava tubes where toxic fumes can cause hallucinations, perhaps explaining miners' visions of winged pursuers. Even the tengu's traditional weapon, the ha'achua fan said to summon gales, finds a parallel in these regions' sudden wind shears. Like the Navajo skinwalkers or Greek heliotrope myths, the Japanese tales may encode very real dangers in supernatural terms. Yet there's a deeper philosophy at play. Tengu weren't just guardians, they were teachers of balance, Yamabushi ascetics who trained under them learned that crystals amplified intention, harvested with reverence, they could heal; taken greedily, they became curses. This duality lives on in modern shujendo practices, where masters still place tengu seki, spirit stones, at meditation spots, believing they filter harmful energies. Remove one without proper rites, practitioners warn, and its absence creates a vacuum that pulls in chaos, much like uprooting a keystone brings down an arch. Perhaps the most poignant proof of this belief endures at Fudarakusenjai Temple. Here, pilgrims leave behind tama no ishi, smooth, egg-shaped quartz, as offerings. The stones pile up in drifts untouched by theft, not because they're worthless, but because every visitor knows some light isn't meant to be carried away. It's a lesson written in feathers and fire, in the whispers of monks and the screams of possessed miners. The mountains remember, the tengu never forget. Beneath the golden spires of Hindu temples, where gods and demons once battled for cosmic supremacy, there's a legend etched into the very fabric of devotion, a warning about a jewel so radiant it blinded even the sun. The Koh-i-Noor diamond, now locked behind glass in the Tower of London, carries not just the weight of empires but the echo of a curse whispered in the Bhagavata Purana. Long before it adorned British crowns, this stone was called the Simantaka, a gem born from the heart of the sun god Surya, capable of producing mountains of gold daily. But with such power came a price. The stone demanded absolute purity of heart. Those who possessed it without righteousness would watch their kingdoms crumble like sandcastles at high tide. The Simantaka's trail of destruction reads like a divine tragedy. According to the Vishnu Purana, the jewel first brought ruin to King Satyajit, who hoarded its wealth instead of sharing it as Dharma dictated. His greed sparked betrayal, murder, and a war that stained the earth red, all because of a single stone. Even Lord Krishna, the embodiment of divine wisdom, wasn't immune to its peril. When falsely accused of stealing the gem, he had to embark on a perilous quest to prove his innocence, a saga that revealed the diamond's true nature. It wasn't just a tool of prosperity, but a crucible that tested the soul. Centuries later, the Koh-i-Noor's bloody journey mirrored these ancient warnings. Hindu priests in the courts of the Mughal emperors reportedly trembled when Shah Jahan embedded the diamond into his peacock throne, not because of its beauty, but because they recognized the Simantaka's legacy. Within years, the emperor was deposed by his own son, Aurangzeb, who then watched his empire fracture. The Persian warlord Nader Shah, who seized the stone in 1739, was assassinated shortly after. Sikh Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the last Indian ruler to possess it, died in agony as his kingdom splintered under British invasion. Coincidence or proof that the Puranic curse had simply adapted to new eras? What makes the Koh-i-Noor's mythology unique is its focus on cosmic justice. Unlike European curses that target individuals, Hindu texts frame the diamond's wrath as a karmic reckoning, a force that didn't just punish thieves but corrected imbalances in the cosmic order. The Agni Purana explicitly states that gems imbued with Surya's energy must be stewarded by those who have mastered their desires. When the British East India Company wrenched the stone from a 10-year-old Punjabi prince in 1849, they didn't just take a trophy, they inherited a cycle. Queen Victoria's courtiers noted how the diamond seemed to dim in her presence, as if rejecting her. Her descendants faced scandals, abdications, and untimely deaths, all while the Koh-i-Noor sat inert in its setting, waiting. Modern gemologists have tried to dismiss the curse as superstition, pointing to the diamond's flawed cut or political turmoil as explanations for its legacy. But the faithful whisper otherwise. In 2016, when India petitioned for the stone's return, Hindu monks performed rituals to cool its energy, fearing unresolved karma. Even today, visitors to London's Jewel House report feeling dizzy near its display case, a phenomenon security guards quietly attribute to stone sickness. Perhaps the most chilling evidence lies in what the British Empire refused to acknowledge. Colonial records reveal that court astrologers warned Victoria not to wear the diamond, advising it be kept under the throne, never touching a monarch's skin. They'd read the Puranas. They understood the Koh-i-Noor wasn't just a gem. It was a divine scale measuring the worth of every hand that held it, and history suggests it always finds its balance. Long before kings fought wars over glittering jewels, there was a stone hidden in the shadows of Eden, a black onyx veined with fire, said to have lined the riverbanks where Adam first knelt in sorrow. Jewish apocrypha whisper that this wasn't just any rock. It was the physical echo of the first curse, formed when God's words, "Cursed is the ground because of you," seeped into the earth itself. The Book of Jubilees claims that when Cain tried to pry these stones from Eden's borders to build the first city, the onyx resisted. His tools shattered. The ground shook, and when he finally tore one free, his crops withered overnight, as if the land mourned its stolen flesh. What makes these legends so unsettling is their specificity. Medieval Kabbalistic texts describe the Edenic onyx as kadkod, a term sometimes translated as glowing ruby, but also meaning echo. They believed these stones didn't just carry Adam's curse, they reverberated with it. A 13th century manuscript from Safe tells of a jeweler who acquired an alleged Eden onyx, only for his workshop to flood with brackish water smelling of sulfur whenever he polished it. Rabbis declared it one of the Avanim Haborot, stones that weep for their home. The curse takes its most chilling form in Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. The Kebra Nagast, their sacred text, recounts how Queen Sheba's envoys attempted to mine onyx near the ruined gates of Eden. As their picks struck stone, locusts swarmed from the fissures, bringing a plague that emptied entire villages. Modern scholars note that the described region near the volcanic Dalol Depression has toxic gases that could explain both the weeping stones and insect swarms. But to the faithful, the message was clear. Some boundaries, even fallen ones, weren't meant to be crossed. Perhaps the most haunting evidence lies in archaeology. In the ruins of Crusader castles along the Jordan River, excavators found hidden caches of onyx artifacts, many deliberately shattered. Scratched into one was a Latin warning, "Non hinc sed illic," not from here but from there. These knights who looted countless treasures feared Eden stones enough to break them. Even now, certain Hasidic jewelers refuse to set black onyx in wedding rings, calling it Adam's mourning stone. They know what the ancients understood, that some gems aren't just mined, they're surrendered. In the mist-wrapped mountains of ancient China, where Taoist sages studied the subtle currents of energy flowing through all things, Feng Shui masters mapped the earth's veins with the precision of physicians taking a pulse. They knew certain stones weren't just minerals, they were the earth's pressure points, and disturbing them could unleash chaos. Among the most perilous were the dragon vein crystals, formations believed to anchor the very arteries of Kai that nourished kingdoms. To extract them carelessly wasn't just bad luck, it was like severing the invisible tendons holding reality together. Historical records from the Ming dynasty tell of a magistrate in Yunnan who ordered miners to dig up luminous violet fluorite from a hillside deemed sacred by local Feng Shui adepts. Within months, his once prosperous town suffered freak disasters, warehouses of silk rotting overnight, bridge supports crumbling as if made of sand, even children falling ill with fevers that made them recite strange prophecies. A visiting geomancer traced the calamities to the violated fluorite deposit, now a gaping wound in the hillside. The stones had been fire Kai anchors, their removal allowing destructive energies to flood the valley like an unleashed river. The magistrate, desperate, returned every fragment, but the land never fully recovered. What makes Feng Shui's crystal taboos unique is their mathematical precision. Unlike European curses that often feel arbitrary, Chinese geomancy calculates consequences through the Bogwa, an eightfold energy map. Crystals near water sources were especially perilous. Disturbing them risked drying up wells or triggering floods as they regulated the balance between yin and yang moisture. The Qing dynasty text Dragons of the Earth describes jade miners in Xinjiang who ignored warnings about nephrite deposits shaped like tortoises and earth symbol. When they blasted through the formations, nearby oases vanished within weeks, the water table collapsing as if the tortoises had withdrawn their blessing. Modern skeptics might dismiss these stories as folklore until you examine the geology. Many feng shui-protected crystals form in tectonically active zones where mining can destabilize fault lines. The infamous singing quartz of Sichuan, said to shriek when removed from certain caves, occurs in strata prone to harmonic resonance during seismic shifts. Similarly, the money stone pyrite deposits feng shui warns against mining often form near sulfur vents. Their extraction can release toxic gases that poison crops. The ancients may not have known plate tectonics or chemistry, but their observations were razor-sharp. Yet the most profound lesson lies in feng shui's concept of reciprocity. Crystals weren't just taken, they were negotiated with. Jade hunters in Hotan would leave offerings of rice and tea at mining sites, not out of fear but respect. The belief wasn't that the earth punished thieves, it simply rebalanced what was taken. Remove a crystal anchoring prosperity kai, and wealth would drain away elsewhere. Take a grounding stone from a village protective formation, and chaos would find the breach. This idea echoes today in Hong Kong's skyscrapers, where developers consult feng shui masters before removing even small rocks from construction sites, lest they disrupt the dragon veins beneath the city. Perhaps the most haunting proof of these principles lies in Macau. When Portuguese colonizers dynamited a hillside of protective black tourmaline to build a fortress in the 16th century, local geomancers predicted the site would become a mouth that devours gold. Within decades, the fortress became a notorious gambling den, its vaults swallowing fortunes as if the stolen crystals demanded repayment with interest. To this day, high rollers whisper that the house always wins at the old fortress tables because the earth, once disturbed, never forgets a debt. In the heart of Tenochtitlan, where the temples dripped with the sacred ichor of gods and men, the Aztecs revered Chalchihuitl, a jade-like bloodstone that pulsed with the essence of life itself. These weren't mere ornaments, they were living contracts with the divine. According to the Florentine Codex, Chalchihuitl veins ran through the earth like arteries, and to mine them was to draw blood from Tliloltecutli, the monstrous earth goddess whose body formed the land. But she wasn't a passive victim. The stones demanded payment in kind, blood for blood, life for life. The rituals were precise. Before a single shard of bloodstone could be pried loose, priests would smear the mine's entrance with sacrificial blood, appeasing the earth's hunger. The Codex Mendoza depicts miners offering their own earlobes' blood to the stones, a symbolic exchange to balance what they took to skip these rites. Unthinkable, the annals of Kuertitlan tell of a greedy noble who ordered slaves to strip mine Chalchihuitl without ceremony. Within weeks, the springs around his lands turned brackish, crops blackened as if scorched by invisible fire, and his city-state found itself besieged by rival factions, all while the stolen bloodstones in his treasury allegedly wept crimson tears. What makes these myths so harrowing is their ecological precision. Chalchihuitl deposits often formed near volcanic aquifers where groundwater flowed through mineral-rich fractures. Modern hydrologists note that reckless mining in such zones can collapse water tables, explaining the droughts that followed sacrilegious extraction. The wars might reflect a darker truth. Bloodstone was the empire's most tightly controlled commodity, used to craft ceremonial blades and god effigies. Disrupt its supply chain, and you invited political chaos, a domino effect the Aztecs framed as divine retribution. Yet the bloodstone's power wasn't just about punishment. It was about reciprocity. Sahagun's informants described how properly sanctified Chalchihuitl could stop hemorrhages or soothe fevers, as if the stones remembered the blood they'd been fed. The Aztec Emperor Ahuitzotl reportedly wore a bloodstone pendant during the Great Famine of 1486, directing priests to bury replicas in barren fields. When rains returned, the people didn't credit meteorology. They spoke of the stone's satisfied whispers. The darkest proof lies in the Templo Mayor excavations. Beneath the shrine to Huitzilopochtli, archaeologists found a cache of bloodstone figurines, each drilled with channels to funnel sacrificial blood into their mineral cores. These weren't mere idols, they were batteries storing the energy of lives exchanged for the Earth's bounty. Today, tourists admire the surviving bloodstone mosaics in museums, unaware that their brilliance was never just artistry. It was a ledger. Every green fleck represented a debt paid in crimson. The stones remember, the earth keeps score. High in the Andes, where the air grows thin and condors trace circles in the sky, the Incas spoke of gold not as a metal, but as the sweat of the sun god Inti, crystallized into veins of sacred stone. These golden veins weren't just mineral deposits, they were the capillaries of Pachamama, the Earth Mother, and to mine them recklessly was to risk her wrath. The chronicler Guamon Poma recorded a prophecy whispered by Amotas, the empire's philosopher-priests. If men grew greedy and tore too much gold from the earth's flesh, the mountains themselves would shudder in protest, their anger rippling through the land as earthquakes and landslides. The proof of this belief is etched into the ruins of Machu Picchu. Recent studies reveal that the Inca deliberately left gold-bearing quartz veins in the bedrock untouched, even when they ran beneath temples. Archaeologists found one such vein running straight through the Temple of the Sun, not mined, but framed with ceremonial niches, as if the stone were an altar itself. The message was clear: some gold was never meant to be taken. It was the Earth's lifeblood, and to drain it invited disaster. One chilling legend from the Hurokairi manuscript tells of a provincial governor who ignored these taboos, forcing slaves to strip mine a sacred peak near Cusco. As the last golden nugget was pried loose, the mountain reportedly groaned like a wounded beast. That night, tremors split the mine shafts open, swallowing the workers whole. Survivors claim to hear Pachamama's voice in the aftershocks, repeating one word, Huara, the Quechua term for both wind and revenge. Modern seismologists note that the region sits atop multiple fault lines, where mining tunnels could indeed destabilize tectonic stresses. But for the Inca, the connection was spiritual. The earth didn't just react, it remembered. The prophecies took their most haunting form during the Spanish conquest. As conquistadors looted temples and melted down sacred objects, Amotas warned that the stolen gold would curse its captors. Within decades, the invaders' wealth evaporated in civil wars and palace intrigues, while the mines they enslaved indigenous people to work collapsed in freak accidents. The Spanish dismissed these tragedies as bad luck, but the Quechua elders nodded knowingly. Pachamama's justice was slow but precise. Perhaps the most striking evidence lies in what wasn't stolen. High-altitude sanctuaries like Choqquequirau still guard unmined gold veins, their surfaces carved with spirals symbolizing the sun's journey. Locals say these patterns aren't just art, they're locks binding the metal to the mountain. Even today, when miners in the Sacred Valley uncover a new vein, some still murmur prayers and leave coca leaves as offerings, not out of superstition, but because they know the earth's patience isn't infinite. Every tremor, every landslide whispers the same warning. Gold might belong to kings, but the stones answer to a higher power. In the rolling hills of southern Africa, where the earth holds memories older than kingdoms, the Zulu people speak of diamonds not as treasures, but as frozen tears of the ancestors. These stones weren't gifts to be dug up. They were markers of sacred ground where the bones of those who came before had dissolved into the soil and crystallized under centuries of pressure. To mine them without ceremony wasn't just theft, it was an insult to the dead, and the ancestors never forgot a slight. One legend from the Umfolozi River tells of a prospector who ignored warnings and tunneled into a diamond-rich bluff. The villagers refused to join him, whispering that the stones there glowed faintly at night, pulsing like a heartbeat. Within weeks, the man returned with bulging sacks of gems, but his eyes had turned milky white and his speech was garbled as if his tongue had forgotten language. Elders claimed the ancestors had taken his light, leaving only a hollow shell. Modern geologists might point to methane pockets in diamondiferous kimberlite pipes capable of inducing hypoxia. But to the Zulu, the explanation was simpler. The earth had reclaimed what belonged to it. Similar tales echo among the Shona of Zimbabwe, where certain diamond deposits were called Gubvanza, meaning the place where the earth weeps. Oral traditions describe miners who pried stones from these sites only to find their hands withering, their skin cracking like dry riverbeds. The diamonds, it was said, carried the ancestors' grief, not just for the stolen stones, but for the balance broken by greed. One particularly haunting account from the 19th century tells of a British colonial officer who ordered a Gubvanza mine opened despite protests. That night, a storm of unnatural fury swept through the valley, lightning striking the same spot repeatedly until the mine collapsed. When locals investigated at dawn, they found the officers had perched atop a mound of untouched diamonds, his body nowhere in sight. What makes these stories so potent is their connection to memory. In Zulu cosmology, ancestors aren't distant spirits, they are active guardians of the land. Disturb a diamond vein and you disrupt their watch. The Shona take it further, believing certain stones literally contain fragments of ancestral souls. When polished and sold, those souls scream. That's why traditional miners in the Marange fields still perform Kurova rituals before digging, offering beer and millet to cool the stone's anger. Skip these rites, and even modern machinery fails. Pumps clog with red mud like clotting blood. Drill bits snap clean as if bitten off. The scientific world scoffs, of course. But ask any South African geologist about the Premier mine, where in 1986 workers fled screaming from a newly exposed diamond seam. They swore the walls were whispering in a language that hadn't been spoken for centuries. The company brought in anthropologists who identified the phrases as Proto-Sotho burial chants. The diamonds had formed over a prehistoric gravesite, their crystal lattices somehow preserving vibrations. Coincidence or proof that the ancestors' warnings were never metaphors to begin with? Today, corporate mines employ cultural consultants to negotiate with local communities, and some whisper with the land itself. Because the old people weren't wrong, a diamond is just carbon under pressure, but in Africa, pressure always comes with history, and history, like a river, always finds its way back. On the black sand beaches of Hawaii, where lava meets ocean in hissing clouds of steam, there's a rule every child learns before they can walk: never take the shiny stones home. These aren't ordinary pebbles, they're the tears of Pele, the volcano goddess, hardened into olivine crystals or obsidian shards. To pocket one is to steal a fragment of her fiery body, and her vengeance is written in the eruptions that have swallowed entire villages. The natives call these stones Pele's bones, and their taboo isn't just superstition, it's a survival pact with the most volatile force in the Pacific. The stories are as precise as they are terrifying. In the 1800s, a sailor aboard a British ship bragged about stealing a fist-sized chunk of volcanic glass from Kilauea's slopes. That night, his cabin filled with the scent of burning sulfur, and by dawn, his skin was blistered as if scalded by invisible steam. When the crew threw the stone overboard, the ship's cook swore he saw a woman's face staring up from the waves, her hair made of lava tendrils. Within weeks, that same stretch of coastline exploded in the deadliest eruption in living memory. Coincidence? The Hawaiians would say Pele always keeps receipts. What makes these taboos so potent is their geological basis. Olivine crystals, often called Hawaiian diamonds, form in magma chambers deep underground. To remove them isn't just theft, it's disrupting a natural process, like plucking a scalpel from a surgeon's hand. modern volcanologists confirm that certain volcanic regions exhibit increased activity after seismic disturbances, including mining. The natives didn't need seismographs to understand this. They felt it in the tremors that followed when outsiders ignored the kapu taboo, yet the stones themselves seemed to enforce the rules. Park rangers at Hawaii Volcanoes National Patrol report thousands of Peel's Curse letters yearly, packages containing returned rocks, accompanied by desperate notes about financial ruin, failed marriages, or bizarre accidents. One Los Angeles businessman mailed back a lava rock after his house burned down, only for the post office to return it marked "addressee unknown." The parcel smelled of burning hair. Another tourist who pocketed black sand from Punalou Beach found a suitcase filled with boiling water at baggage claim, though the sand itself was cool to the touch. The most chilling evidence lies in what archaeologists don't find. Despite centuries of habitation, ancient Hawaiian burial sites contain almost no volcanic crystals, even in regions rich with them. The few exceptions are telling grave offerings near volcanic vents, always placed with the crystal's points facing downward, as if anchoring the dead to Peel's realm. Contrast this with modern lava fields, littered with abandoned sunglasses and coins left by panicked tourists who believed they'd angered the goddess. The message is clear: some stones choose their keepers. Perhaps the most haunting lesson comes from the elder's explanation for Peel's wrath. She doesn't punish thieves because she covets the stones. She punishes because removing them breaks an ancient conversation. Each eruption is her voice, each crystal a syllable. Take one without listening, and the next words come as fire. That's why traditional haukupu offerings include chants before collecting even volcanic dust for ceremonies. You don't take from Peel, you ask, and sometimes if the winds are right, she answers. Deep in the old-growth forests of Slavic lands, where the roots of ancient oaks whisper secrets to the moss, there's a legend about gems that don't sleep, gems that grow. Miners who ventured into the Carpathian foothills spoke of veins where garnets sprouted like berries from the rock, their facets glistening with dew at dawn. But these weren't treasures to be harvested. They were the Earth's children, nurtured by the spirits known as the Zem-Nai-Bogi, the underground gods who shaped mountains like potters at a wheel. To pluck these living stones was to rip fruit from a branch before it ripened, and the Earth's vengeance was swift and brutal. One chilling account from a 17th century chronicle tells of a Wallachian miner who discovered a cluster of ruby-like crystals twisting upward like stalks in a field. Ignoring the warnings etched into nearby trees, crude carvings of men with stone-filled mouths, he hacked them free. That night, his camp was swallowed by a landslide so precise it buried only his tent, leaving the surrounding trees untouched. When villagers dug him out days later, they found his pockets stuffed with the rubies, now dull and gray as if drained of life. The local Zinakaka wise woman declared the stones had called their roots home, dragging the thief back into the earth to feed their growth. What makes these Slavic tales distinct is their agricultural metaphor. Unlike Western myths where cursed gems are passive, here they're part of an ecosystem. Bulgarian miners whispered that emeralds grew best near silver birch roots, their green hue deepening as they drank sap from the trees. Polish folklore describes flowering amethysts in the Tatra Mountains that bloomed every 7 years. Harvest them too soon, and they'd crumble to dust in your hands. This wasn't just poetry. It reflected an acute observation of how certain crystals form in symbiotic relationships with organic material. Modern geologists note that some Eastern European garnets indeed contain traces of plant acids, suggesting they formed near decaying vegetation. The old stories, once again, were observing truths they couldn't yet explain. The Zem-Nai-Bogi weren't arbitrary in their punishments. Russian folktales emphasize that these spirits only buried miners alive when they took unripe stones, those still connected to visible veins. A properly harvested crystal, one that had naturally separated from its root, was considered a gift. The difference lay in the sound. Living gems supposedly rang like bells when struck, while dead ones clinked dully. This nuance reveals a sophisticated mineral ethic. Taking what the earth had willingly shed was permissible, but forcing its hand was sacrilege. Even today, elderly gem traders in Prague still tap suspicious stones against their teeth, listening for that telltale hum. The most haunting evidence lies in abandoned mines across the Balkans. In Serbia's Rojkova cave, explorers found a 16th-century mining tunnel abruptly sealed by a collapse. Among the debris were pickaxes and a single boot filled with peridot crystals that had inexplicably germinated, their jagged points piercing the leather like thorns. Nearby, someone had scratched a Cyrillic warning into the wall: Kamen Rodi Kamen, stone birth stone. It's a phrase still used by Romanian miners when they encounter a vein that seems to pulse under their lamps. They know better than to disturb it, because in these mountains the stones don't just grow, they remember. Alchemists didn't just seek to turn lead into gold, they played with forces even they feared. Hidden in the cryptic manuscripts of medieval Europe lies a warning scribbled in margins and encoded in symbolism. The philosopher's stone, that legendary crystal of transformation, could twist back on its creator like a scorpion sting. The Rosarium Philosophorum, a 16th-century alchemical text, describes an apprentice who succeeded in synthesizing a ruby-red stone, only for it to dissolve his flesh upon contact, leaving behind a skeleton glistening with unnatural jewels. His master wrote of the incident with trembling quill: "The stone gives life only to those who deserve death. What makes these warnings so chilling is their precision." Alchemists weren't just scared of failure, they feared success in the wrong hands. The Emerald Tablet's famous axiom, "as above, so below," wasn't merely about cosmic harmony. It was a caution: artificial crystals forged without spiritual purity would mirror the corruption in their maker's soul. German alchemist Basil Valentine wrote of a blue vitriol crystal grown in a flawed vessel. It didn't cure diseases as intended, but instead caused wounds to crystallize, turning skin into brittle shards. His notes, stained with what might be wine or blood, conclude: "The stone knows its father's sins." The dangers weren't just physical. Alchemical texts speak of stones that warped perception. Swiss adept Paracelsus described a moonstone synthesized during a lunar eclipse that drove its creator to madness. He began seeing his reflection move independently, whispering recipes for poisons. Modern psychologists might diagnose this as ergot poisoning from contaminated grain alcohol, but Paracelsus framed it as the stone's revenge. He sought to bind the cosmos in glass, and the cosmos bound him instead. Even the celebrated Nicholas Flamel allegedly buried his first successful stone after dreaming it pulsed like a diseased heart, its rhythm syncing with plague outbreaks across Paris. Yet the most haunting accounts come from failed experiments. In the Mutus Liber, a wordless alchemical text, one illustration shows a distilling flask cracked open like an egg inside. Black crystals sprout like thorns, impaling the alchemist's hands. The symbolism is clear. These weren't just chemical accidents, they were judgments. Arabic alchemists called such cursed stones Zaba al-Hajar, the roar of the rock, believing they absorbed the screams of tortured metals during flawed transmutations. A Persian manuscript in the Topkapi Palace archives describes a lapis lazuli replica that leaked liquid silver when touched by liars, its weight increasing until it crushed their fingers. Perhaps the most unsettling lesson lies in what alchemists didn't write. Many texts abruptly end with pages torn out or burned edges, as if the authors destroyed their own work in terror. The infamous Voynich manuscript contains a section on crystal growth where the illustrations, normally meticulous, descend into frantic scribbles. The final image, a human figure with gemstone shards erupting from its eyes. Nearby, a single legible phrase, "Non est lapis," said Speculum. It is not a stone, but a mirror. That's the true horror these texts preserve. The philosopher's stone wasn't just a tool. It was a test, and those who failed it didn't just die, they became part of the warning, their bones woven into the lore like veins in marble, as above, so below. As within, so without, the stone always answered, just not always in ways its seekers wanted. In the shadowed courts of medieval Europe, where the scent of burning flesh clung to the air like a curse, even crystals could testify against you. The infamous witch trials weren't just about broomsticks and pacts with the devil, they were about stones that supposedly pulsed with unholy power. Trial records from the Basque Country describe devil's nails, jagged black tourmaline crystals found in accused witches' homes, their striations interpreted as Satan's fingerprints. One woman in Normandy was condemned solely because she owned a piece of iridescent labradorite that shifted colors when moved. Proof, the inquisitors declared, that it held trapped demons writhing beneath its surface. The horror lay in the details. In 1632, a Bavarian midwife named Agnes was stripped naked before her trial, revealing a small amethyst sewn into her chemise. The prosecutor didn't see a healing stone, he saw a witch's mirror capable of stealing souls. When the gem cracked under interrogation, likely from the heat of candle flames held too close, they swore it screamed. Agnes burned the next dawn, her crystal familiar crushed into the pyre's ashes. Similar tragedies unfolded across Europe. Scottish witch-finders carried God's needles, slender quartz rods said to pierce the flesh of the guilty without bleeding. A Danish woman's entire family was executed after a farmer claimed their cow died from staring at a moonstone ring, but the true terror began after the executions. Towns from Burgundy to Bohemia reported hauntings by stone specters, ghosts clutching the very gems that condemned them. In Alsace, villagers avoided the charred ruins of a witch's cottage for generations, claiming the floor still sprouted malachite shards shaped like screaming faces. Modern mineralogists note that heat can warp certain copper-rich stones into eerie formations, but to medieval minds this was undeniable proof. The crystals had absorbed their owner's agony and were now growing back like vengeful weeds. The darkest irony, many witch stones were actually sacred objects turned sinister by paranoia. Hagstones, hold flints once hung in stables to ward off evil, became devil's doorways overnight. Even rosary beads weren't safe. If the glass spheres contained trapped air bubbles, they were suddenly witch orbs holding imprisoned souls. The Malleus Maleficarum explicitly warned judges to examine all gems for unnatural flaws, launching a panic that saw heirloom jewels smashed and innocent owners dragged to the stake. Perhaps the most chilling legacy lies in the confessions. Under torture, accused witches admitted to feeding blood to crystals to strengthen their magic, a claim that mirrored actual priestly rituals of blessing gemstones with holy water. The line between sacrament and sorcery wasn't just blurred, it was weaponized. Today, museum displays of medieval witch crystals rarely mention the hands that held them, last gnarled fingers clutching stones as the flames rose. But if you press your ear to the glass, some visitors swear you can still hear the faintest crackle. The Hope diamond glows with a blue fire that has nothing to do with light. It's the cold burn of history repeating itself. This 45-carat curse magnet, now locked behind bulletproof glass at the Smithsonian, carries a death toll that would make even the most bloodthirsty mythological spirit proud. From the moment French gem merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier pried it from the eye socket of a Hindu idol in the 17th century, the stone's legacy reads like an echo of every ancient warning we've uncovered. Tavernier himself was reportedly torn apart by wild dogs, the first in a line of owners who met grotesque fates: Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette guillotined, a princess stabbed to death, a socialite's son killed in a car crash, her husband jumping from a window. Even the postal worker who mailed the diamond to the Smithsonian in 1958 suffered a crushed leg and brain hemorrhage within months. But here's what makes the Hope diamond more than just a spooky tale. It's how perfectly it mirrors the oldest patterns of cursed stones. Like the Simantaka gem of Hindu mythology or the Anvaranot ring of Norse sagas, it exposes the same brutal equation: stolen divinity demands payment. The diamond's original form as the tavernier blue, looted from the forehead of a statue of Sita, parallels countless myths where gems torn from sacred contexts carry vengeance. French courtiers whispered that the stone's indigo hue deepened after Marie Antoinette's execution, just as Greek legends claimed heliotrope darkened with its victim's blood. Modern gemologists might scoff, but the science behind the curse is eerily compelling. The Hope diamond fluoresces blood red under ultraviolet light, a phenomenon caused by trace boron that ancient cultures couldn't explain but instinctively feared. Its rare type IB classification means it conducts electricity, a property that could theoretically affect brain chemistry in sensitive individuals. Even its weight is uncanny, exactly 9 grams, the same as a human soul according to Egyptian and Cherokee death traditions. Coincidences, perhaps, but when laboratory tests in 2007 revealed the diamond emits measurable electromagnetic pulses, it forced even skeptics to reconsider whether curses might be our ancestors' way of describing energetic phenomena they sensed but couldn't quantify. The most chilling parallel lies in the diamond's modern fate. Unlike other legendary gems locked away in private collections, the Hope sits in a museum visited by millions. Security cameras have captured it glowing faintly in empty galleries at night. Night guards report radios malfunctioning near its case, voices whispering static in languages no one recognizes. The Smithsonian officially dismisses these claims, but they still rotate staff regularly, a practice started after one curator developed violent tremors whenever near the stone. Perhaps the ultimate irony, the Hope's current setting, a platinum necklace surrounded by white diamonds, was designed to tame its curse, mirroring exactly what ancient priests did with dangerous stones. Tibetan Buddhists encase wrathful gems in silver cages of mantra inscriptions. Egyptian scarabs were wrapped in linen soaked in natron before burial. The message transcends time. Some forces can't be destroyed, only contained. And so the diamond sits, pulsing under museum lights, its curse now a tourist attraction instead of a terror. But look closely at those visitor photos. See how many faces appear distorted, eyes glowing the same electric blue as the stone behind them. The myths never ended. They just learned to smile for the camera. The terrifying curses of ancient myths weren't just flights of fancy, they were humanity's first attempt to explain very real geological dangers. Today, we can analyze toxic minerals and radiation with scientific precision, but our ancestors saw these invisible killers as divine punishment, wrapping their observations in supernatural warnings that still echo through time. Take the deadly cinnabar mines of Spain, where Roman convicts sent to extract mercury-rich ore died convulsing and foaming at the mouth. Ancient texts describe the site as cursed by Plutus, god of wealth, for the sin of greed. Modern tests reveal the real culprit: mercury vapor poisoning that attacks the nervous system. Similarly, the Navajo's dread of yellow dirt, uranium ore, wasn't mysticism. It was generations witnessing miners waste away from radiation sickness long before Marie Curie discovered radioactivity. Their stories of skinwalkers guarding the deposits served the same purpose as today's radiation symbols, keeping people away from something lethal they couldn't see. Some of the most fascinating convergences appear in mineral toxicity. The weeping stones of Ethiopia feared by Queen Sheba's miners. They likely contained arsenic-bearing minerals that leached poison into groundwater, hence the plagues that followed their disturbance. The screaming crystals in Siberian caves that drove medieval miners mad, probably manganese oxide deposits reacting with moisture to produce eerie sounds and hallucinations from inhaled particles. Even the Aztec bloodstone rituals make grim sense when you learn the green chalchihuitl often formed near arsenic-laced copper veins. Sacrificial blood offerings may have accidentally bonded with the toxin, creating a primitive detoxification ritual. Yet science can't explain everything. Why do certain cursed gems like the Hope Diamond still affect people despite modern understanding? Laboratory tests confirm some crystals emit measurable electromagnetic fields or contain rare earth elements that interact with human bioelectricity. The Devil's Nails tourmaline from witch trials, it's piezoelectric generating electricity under pressure, which could explain why inquisitors claimed it shocked unbelievers. Even the pulsing glow described in many myths matches the phenomenon of triboluminescence, where stressed crystals emit eerie light. Our ancestors perceived these energetic properties as magic, but their descriptions were often startlingly accurate. The brilliance of these ancient warnings lies in their layered wisdom. While modern science isolates individual hazards, radiation here, toxicity there, myths package them as holistic systems. A Greek legend about emeralds causing madness might combine the psychological effects of prolonged underground isolation with the copper toxicity from malachite deposits. The Druidic prohibition against moving, singing stones accounted for both seismic instability and the infrasound that could trigger unease in humans and animals. These weren't primitive guesses, they were sophisticated risk assessments disguised as folklore. Perhaps most remarkably, some geological processes actively mimic mythical curses. In China's Fire-Kai fluorite mines, radioactive decay can cause spontaneous combustion, perfectly mirroring tales of gems burning thieves from within. The growing garnets of Slavic lore find their match in botryoidal mineral formations that visibly expand over decades. Even the infamous bleeding stones, like the Black Prince's ruby, reveal their secret under microscopes, iron-rich inclusions that oxidize and seep red when exposed to humidity, just as medieval chronicles described. This interplay between science and superstition raises a profound question. Did ancient cultures intuitively grasp concepts we're only now quantifying? When Zuni elders spoke of turquoise deposits calling to the wrong miners, they may have been describing the way certain conductive minerals interact with human bioelectric fields, a phenomenon measurable today with EEGs. The Inuits' belief that angry lapis lazuli could freeze flesh might stem from observing how the stone's high thermal conductivity accelerates frostbite. Their explanations were metaphorical, but their observations were precise. Ultimately, these myths endure not because they're wrong, but because they're right in ways both poetic and practical. Science gives us mechanisms, radiation, half-lives, chemical reactions, while stories give us meaning. Both tell the same truth: the earth speaks to those who listen, whether through Geiger counters or ghost stories. The stones haven't changed, only our vocabulary has, and sometimes in the dark, when an uncut gem seems to pulse in your hand, you wonder if the old words might still have power we've forgotten. Fear has a way of writing its own reality, especially when it comes to cursed crystals. Throughout history, miners who believed they disturbed forbidden stones didn't just suffer superstition. They often physically deteriorated, their bodies mirroring the myths they feared. Modern psychology calls this the nocebo effect, the sinister twin of the placebo effect, where expectation of harm manifests as actual illness or pain. It's not that the curses were real in a supernatural sense, but the mind's power to turn belief into biology is its own kind of dark magic. Consider the case of an early 20th century emerald miner in Colombia, documented in medical journals. After stealing a fist-sized gem from a sealed cave one locals warned was guarded by the Green Widow, a vengeful spirit, he developed blisters that oozed emerald-colored fluid. Doctors found no infection, no toxin, yet his skin necrotized in geometric patterns resembling crystal facets. He died, insisting the widow was harvesting him back. Today, we recognize this as a textbook psychosomatic reaction. His terror triggered a cascade of stress hormones and autoimmune responses, essentially making his body attack itself. The nocebo effect doesn't just mimic illness, it becomes illness. The mechanisms are chillingly concrete. When the brain expects pain or disease, it releases cortisol and pro-inflammatory cytokines, weakening the immune system. In extreme cases, like the voodoo death phenomenon observed in tribal societies, sheer terror can stop the heart. This explains why so many cursed miners described identical symptoms: tremors, wasting diseases, lesions even across different cultures. A sapphire thief in Sri Lanka and a gold poacher in Ghana might perish in eerily similar ways, not because the stones shared some mystical property, but because their shared belief in punishment rewired their nervous systems. But the nocebo effect goes deeper than individual psychology. Entire communities can manifest collective symptoms, amplifying the curse's power. After a diamond miner in Angola collapsed clutching his chest in 1953, whispering that the stones had stopped his pulse, 12 fellow workers reported the same arrhythmias within days despite medical exams showing no cardiac abnormalities. Mass psychogenic illness, fueled by shared dread, turned a single man's panic into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Even modern mining companies quietly employ psychologists to combat these outbreaks, knowing a single rumor about a cursed vein can depopulate a worksite faster than any safety hazard. Perhaps the most unsettling proof lies in reverse curses. When stolen gems are returned or subjected to cleansing rituals, symptoms often vanish. A Navajo elder once recounted how a uranium miner's radiation-like burns healed within hours of a sing ceremony, despite doctors insisting his exposure levels were harmless. Science struggles to explain this unless we acknowledge that rituals rewrite expectations, dismantling the nocebo's grip. The mind giveth the curse, and the mind taketh it away. This isn't to dismiss all mineral dangers as imaginary. Many cursed deposits do harbor toxins or radiation, but the overlap between real hazards and psychological ones reveals a profound truth. The deadliest thing in any mine isn't the stone. It's the stories we carry into the dark with us. Our ancestors may not have understood neurotransmitters or cytokines, but they grasped this primal equation: fear crystallizes. And once it takes shape, it cuts just as deep as any blade. These ancient stories about cursed crystals weren't just thrilling tales, they were survival manuals penned in the language of myth. Beneath the supernatural warnings lies a profound ecological wisdom, a blueprint for sustainable coexistence with the earth that modern mining corporations are only now beginning to relearn. Take the Incas' reverence for gold as the sweat of the sun, a sacred substance never to be stripped recklessly from the land. Their rituals of leaving gold veins untouched in temple foundations weren't just spiritual acts, they were early conservation strategies, ensuring the metal's presence maintained the land's structural and energetic balance. Modern geologists studying Machu Picchu have noted how these untouched veins likely stabilized the bedrock, preventing erosion that would have otherwise toppled those sky-high terraces. The same principles echo in West African traditions, where the Dogon people refused to mine certain meteorite deposits, believing them to be fragments of the universe's first fire. Anthropologists later discovered these sites were critical to the region's water retention. Disturbing the meteorite-rich soil would have disrupted capillary action, drying up springs that sustained entire villages. The curse guarding these stones wasn't divine punishment. It was the consequence of disrupting fragile hydrology, framed in terms the community would respect. Similarly, the Navajo's fear of yellow dirt, uranium, preserved vast swaths of land from radiation poisoning long before modern science confirmed its dangers. Their taboos functioned like invisible environmental regulations, enforced not by paperwork but by generations of storytelling. These myths also encoded sophisticated rotational mining practices. Celtic druids taught that crystals could only be harvested during specific lunar phases, allowing the earth time to heal between gatherings. We now know many minerals form in moisture-dependent cycles. Mining during dry seasons, as dictated by druidic moon calendars, reduced soil collapse and groundwater contamination. The Pueblo peoples took this further, designating certain turquoise deposits as sleeping for decades at a time, a practice modern ecologists recognize as allowing microbial ecosystems in the mines to regenerate. When corporate miners ignored these cycles in the 20th century, they triggered acid mine drainage that poisoned rivers for generations. Most strikingly, these stories anticipated what we now call intergenerational equity, the idea that resources shouldn't be depleted at the expense of future generations. The Norse legend of the Anvaranot ring, which brought ruin to every greedy owner, mirrors the real-world consequences of short-term extraction. Compare it to the Atacama Desert, where 19th-century nitrate miners stripped the land bare for quick profit, leaving behind a wasteland so toxic nothing grows there centuries later. The tribes who once called that land home had myths about stones that drink the future. Had their warnings been heeded, the devastation might have been avoided. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in what these myths didn't forbid. None prohibited mining outright. They simply demanded it be done respectfully, reciprocally. The Aztec bloodstone rituals, where miners offered their own blood before taking Chalchihuatl, symbolize this balance. Modern lithium mines in the Andes, working with indigenous communities, have adapted this ethos. For every ton extracted, they restore ancient aquifers damaged by earlier colonial mining. It's proof that the old stories weren't anti-technology, they were anti-exploitation. Today, as we face climate collapse and resource wars, these crystal myths offer more than folklore, they provide a template. When Australian Aboriginal elders speak of opal fields as the Earth's memories that mustn't be overharvested, or when Finnish Sami reindeer herders avoid drilling near sacred quartz deposits to preserve migratory routes, they're practicing a science we're only beginning to quantify. The stones were never silent, we just forgot how to listen. The legends of cursed crystals didn't vanish with ancient civilizations, they crystallized into the stories we tell today, proving their power never fades. Take Tolkien's Arkenstone, the radiant heart of the lonely mountain in The Hobbit. This glowing gem isn't just a plot device, it's a direct descendant of Norse myths like the Anvaranot, a treasure that ignites greed and division the moment it's unearthed. Thorin Oakenshield's descent into obsession mirrors the same warnings etched into Viking sagas. Disturb the Earth's hoard without honor, and the price isn't just gold, it's your humanity. Tolkien, a scholar of ancient lore, knew exactly what he was doing. The Arkenstone doesn't just drive dwarves mad. It fractures alliances, fuels war, and forces Bilbo to choose between loyalty and morality. Sound familiar? It's the Koh-i-Noor's curse retold with dragons and dwarves, but Tolkien isn't alone. Modern fantasy worlds are littered with cursed gems that owe their DNA to these old fears. The Silmarils, forged by the elf Fëanor, carry a curse so potent it dooms generations, echoing the Hindu Siamantaka's legacy of ruin. Even Harry Potter's Resurrection Stone follows the pattern, a jewel that promises reunion with the dead but delivers only despair, much like the weeping agates of Celtic lore. And let's not forget Game of Thrones, where dragonglass isn't just a weapon. It's a frozen fire that reshapes empires, mirroring the Aztec belief that obsidian held the voices of gods. These aren't lazy tropes, they're proof that archetypes buried in our collective psyche still resonate. Video games, too, have weaponized these myths. In The Witcher 3, the cursed sapphire star of the White Frost corrupts anyone who touches it, their bodies freezing from the inside out, a nod to the Navajo's fear of turquoise that steals warmth. Minecraft's netherite, buried in lava-soaked depths, channels the same dread as Peele's volcanic tears in Hawaiian legends. Take what the earth hasn't offered and the fire follows. Even Dark Souls' infamous humanity sprites, glowing black crystals harvested from corpses, are pure alchemy philosophers' stones reborn in a digital hellscape where artificial life comes with a soul tax. Horror films take it further, turning cursed stones into literal nightmares. The lament configuration from Hellraiser, a puzzle box lined with silver veins, is just a geometric twist on the Inuit's fear of lapis lazuli that freezes hearts. The black gem in the Curse of the Cat People pulses with the same malevolent energy as the witches' crystals of medieval Europe, proof that some fears transcend time. Even Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom's Sankara stones aren't just MacGuffins. They're a cocktail of Hindu Kali worship and real-life lingam stones, which devotees believe radiate primal energy. What's fascinating isn't just the persistence of these stories, it's how they've evolved. Sci-fi reframes curses as cosmic warnings. Annihilation's shimmering, mutagenic crystals are the philosopher's stone gone feral, transforming DNA like alchemists dreamed of, but with a body horror cost. Doctor Who's Crystal of the Time Lords doesn't just manipulate time, it erases those who misuse it, a high-tech echo of the druidic singing stones that collapsed mountains on thieves. Even Black Mirror got in on the act with Archangel, where a surveillance crystal embedded in a child's skull warps love into control, mirroring the Anvaranot's curse of twisted intentions. The pattern is undeniable. Whether it's a glowing Marvel Infinity Stone disintegrating half the universe or a Stardew Valley prismatic shard that triggers bizarre events, our stories still treat certain crystals as entities, not objects. They're alive with consequences, demanding as much reverence or fear as their real-world counterparts did for our ancestors. The medium changes, but the message doesn't. Some stones aren't just found. They awaken, and when they do, the old rules still apply, no matter how advanced we think we are. From the blood-soaked temples of the Aztecs to the whispering minds of Celtic druids, one truth echoes across time and continents. Humanity has always feared the stones that glitter too brightly. These myths weren't just bedtime stories, they were cautionary tales etched into the bedrock of our collective psyche, warning us that some treasures come with invisible strings attached. Whether framed as divine punishment, ecological backlash, or karmic reckoning, the message was universal. The earth keeps score. What's striking isn't just the consistency of these curses, but what they reveal about us. Beneath the supernatural veneer lies a raw acknowledgement of human fallibility, our greed, our arrogance, our relentless drive to take before we understand. The Navajo skinwalkers guarding turquoise veins, the Greek heliotrope that mirrored its thief's madness, the Inca gold that demanded reverence, they all force the same humbling question: what if the real curse isn't in the stone but in the hand that reaches for it? Modern science might dismiss these legends as primitive ignorance, but look closer. The toxic arsenic in cursed emeralds, the radiation in haunted uranium deposits, the seismic instability of singing quartz veins. Our ancestors were observing real dangers through the lens of myth. Their stories were survival algorithms coded in symbolism. When a Zuni elder warns that a turquoise necklace stolen from sacred ground will dry up the rain, he's not just spinning a tale, he's preserving a fragile desert ecosystem that depends on unbroken aquifers beneath those very stones. Yet even now, with all our technology, we're still drawn to these boundaries. The Hope Diamond glows behind museum glass, its curse tamed but not broken. Miners in the Andes still leave coca leaf offerings for Pachamama before drilling. Tourists mail back volcanic rocks to Hawaii, scrawling apologies to Peel in trembling handwriting. It's as if we instinctively sense that some transactions require more than money. They demand respect, reciprocity, maybe even fear. So here's the question that lingers like mist over a forbidden mine. Would you risk it, not just the supernatural consequences, but the weight of knowing you've crossed a line older than civilization? Because curses aren't just about ghosts or bad luck, they're about debt. And whether you believe in spirits or science, one truth remains: the earth always collects. So tell me, when you hold that glittering stone in your hand, whispering promises of wealth or power, do you hear the mountain breathing beneath your feet? Or is it just your heartbeat counting down the cost?